Golovkin fight, similar thing happened with the knuckles, and it was, again, you know, I was fine by the time of the fight, but there was a 2-week period there where I couldn't punch. I was just shadowboxing and running. I was just going back to sit in a house on my own, in a flat on my own, or I might kill the time walking around the city centre, getting a coffee, or, you know, very lonely, very much in my own head. And if I've left the gym and I've had a bad spar, then the self-doubt creeps in, and all the, you know, confidence on the floor, all of a sudden the negativity. You know, it is tough, it is hard, it is lonely, but what did you expect? This is what you signed up for. How much do you want it? You're going to sit there and cry and feel sorry for yourself. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. You think all these people are at the top now haven't gone through what you're going through right now? We're going to sit there, roll over and feel sorry for yourself and cry and whinge, and what are you going to do? Quit? Or are you going to man the fuck up, face what you have to face? Do you know what I mean?
I want to begin by asking a little bit around Saudi Arabia and the boxing scene out there. Have you found that so far?
It's been good. We did, the shows have been, I mean, when I say it's been good, it's been, you know, it's lacked the atmosphere of an O2 Arena or a Madison Square Garden or an MGM Grand. It hasn't carried, you know, we don't get much travelling support, and the support that is there, obviously, there's no booze. So people kind of getting carried away in the moment, Sweet Caroline, all that. It's we don't have that, and you miss that, I feel. But don't get me wrong, the investment that Turkey Al Sheikh has put into boxing, that his influence in his ability to get Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn and other promoters sitting around a table willing to make fights. I think there's lots of fights that have been made which have gone on for Riyadh season, which I don't think they would have been made had you know, this new Riyadh season situation happened. You know, Bivar Beterbiev, would that fight have happened? Don't know. Would the undisputed Fury Usyk have happened? Don't know. You'd like to say, look, the best fight, the best, but I don't know if they would have, with the money out being there, and they've put the money up, they've sponsored the event, they've buy the shows, so to speak, and then try and recoup their funds afterwards. But the guarantee in the purse is to get these fights on. So from that point of view, it's been very good. I think that people want to see the best fighting the best. You know, boxing is not on its own. The golf have been out there with the Live, the Formula One, the tennis, football. You know, it's a lot of big events are happening there.
You mentioned the element of alcohol and the fandom perspective. Have you found that as a co-commentator, kind of absorbing that atmosphere in comparison to maybe America and the UK?
Yeah, it's more difficult. It's more difficult to sort of, when you're commentating, you're trying to set the scene and the ring walks, especially when it's a fight of the magnitude of Fury and Usyk, which was historic. It was the first undisputed heavyweight championship of the 4-belt era. 2 undefeated fighters. You know, the anticipation was massive. And there was atmosphere. There was a significant better atmosphere from previous Saudi shows, because pretty much all the other Saudi shows, it was not many people travelled over. But I think with that fight, a lot did travel. A lot of Fury fans travelled. I think a lot of Usyk fans travelled. So it was the best show we'd done in Saudi by a country mile. So it was actually, from our point of view then, it was like, whoa, you know, we were probably, you know, subconsciously prepared for a lower key event, but actually it was surprisingly, you know, pretty really good. But you know, again, of course, if that had been at the O2 or Wembley Stadium, or like I said, Madison Square Garden, then the atmosphere would have been on a whole different level.
Now, where do you see that going, Matt, in terms of Saudi Arabia's influence? Where do you see that going in the future in terms of the financial opportunity, and also, you know, the magnitude of fights happening in that Riyadh season period? Any ideas on where you see the future of boxing going with that?
Well, you know, it's good to look ahead, but there's no point looking further than you can see. And as of now, for the foreseeable, from what we can see, you know, Turkey Al Sheikh is very much bought into boxing. I think he's bought into the zone. I think he's, you know, sitting down with a list with Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn, and he's got, you know, even Golden Boy are in on the action now, Top Rank 2, and he's very much he's got a list of fights that he wants to make. um, and it looks like they're all guns blazing. So I don't know, but for the foreseeable, it looks like that's the place where the big fights are going to be.
Let me bring you back to the early stages of your career then, Matt. So obviously, growing up in the West Midlands and that Irish influence, how did boxing become a passion for you at a young age?
I just my dad really was his big favourite sports were uh, hurling and Gaelic football, GAA. You know, and they were the first sports that I was exposed to, introduced to, and loved, enjoyed, and loved. And then football, playing football at school. And then boxing. My first memories really of boxing was the Mike Tyson fights. My dad and uncles and different people, kind of staying up for those fights or talking about them. I think the Bruno Tyson fight was a big one. And then I remember my dad, I was watching the Larry Holmes Tyson fight with my dad, and he was explaining to me that Larry Holmes had been the former champion, etc. And then that kind of sort of coincided with the me watching the Rocky movies, so it was kind of I suppose those things connected. And then we knew a guy, that a friend of my dad's, his son, 10, 11 years older than me, but he boxed amateur in Birmingham for a small league boxing club. And that fascinated me, and eventually my dad took me along when I was 10 years old, and I couldn't box though till I was 11, but I went down when I was 10, and I kind of stopped going then for about 6 months, and when I was 11, I went back.
And in terms of that process then, and I suppose you're probably young to understand this, but you mentioned, Gaelic football, GAA, football, and then team sports. What's the mindset going into maybe more individual sports and obviously you competing on your own? Is there a difference there in terms of that process of trying to motivate and perform at the best you can be?
Yeah, I think team sports and individual sports, I mean, there's no comparison really in lots of ways. They're so different, because the pressure, the spotlight, everything's all on you. If you're playing in a team sport, you're having a bad day, you can get substituted. You know what I mean? You get took off or whatever. You don't want to get taken off, but you know what I mean. In terms of if you're having a shocker, you can get pulled out of it, can't you? Or if you lose, even if you had a bad game, you won't have been the only person. You won't have just been your fault completely. There's 11 or 15 or whatever, how many people on a team. You lose. If the loss, the pain of losing is shared, but also the glory of winning is shared. So in boxing, in individual sports, certainly in boxing, I can't speak for other ones, but certainly in boxing, um, it's literally the agony or the ecstasy. You're either devastated when you lose, or you're literally on the moon. You're that high. The adrenaline, the buzz, the hot. It's there's no comparison, to be honest, between team sports and individuals in that regard. And I think in boxing particularly as well, because you look, I'm sure if you lose a game of tennis and it's a Wimbledon final or something, you're going to be gutted, aren't you? But there's another tournament. There's next year. With boxing,
Yeah.
you know, it's like when you win, you go on, or when you lose. Not only it's a bit stocks and shares, it's snakes and ladders a little bit boxing. It you're as good as your last fight. Like in other sports, you're as good as your last performance, I guess. But look, if you're playing for Man United or Villa or whoever, and you play badly at the weekend, you probably got another game midweek coming up, or certainly by the following week. You can you have another good game, and it's kind of about you back up there. You're gonna have some bad games, But in boxing, when you lose, it's like you certainly at top level, you're probably only boxing twice a year. So, and also depending how you lose, it could take you multiple years to get back where you were, if ever. Depending how you lose, how you get froze out after that, if you get the opportunity. It's not always you lose and you get an immediate rematch. You could lose and it could take you a long time to build back up into that position. So the stakes are so much higher in boxing as opposed to, say, other individual sports, like I say, at tennis. Yeah, you lose in Wimbledon, you're gutted, you're devastated. But there's another Grand Slam. Could be the French Open. There's the American Open. There's all these other tournaments. And next year Wimbledon is going to come around. You get that. You get your you get, say, a world title shot, and you don't perform, or you do perform, but it doesn't go your way, and you thought you won it or whatever, and you there's no guarantee that you're going to get another crack at it. So I think the stakes in that regard are so much higher, and not just with that, your earning potential. You negotiate your purse before the fight, you get X amount. Now, whether you win or lose that fight is gonna massively impact what you earn for your next fight. So it's and also, like, a game of football, it's gonna be 90 minutes no matter what happens. A game, a fight could be over in 30 seconds. Do you know what I mean? That fight, that when that first bell goes, there's no guarantee it's going 12 rounds. It's probably, two big heavyweights, probably unlikely it's gonna go 12 rounds, but the stakes are huge. So it's like, I don't know. I think in lots of ways, boxing, it's the highs are unbelievable. I think because of that fear, fear of losing, fear of failure, fear of what this, that, and the other, makes the butterflies so much more. But they're a good thing because they make you sharp. They make you react quickly. They make the reflexes sharp. You want to be nervous. You should be nervous. You know, but it's definitely, if you're comparing it to other sports, it's a different level completely. And I've played lots of other sports. I played football
Yeah.
when I stopped playing football when I was about 13. I think I got a bad knees. I was good slatters, and I was playing too much. Really, I was playing for my Sunday team. I was playing for the school. I was playing for the borough. I was playing for the league side. I was picked for them. It was like, I was a good player, centre midfield as well. So I was doing lots of running, Gaelic football, hurling on the weekends. Played rugby for the school. So, all those sports, I played them, and yeah, there was some big games in those that meant everything to you as a team. And don't get me wrong, the camaraderie of a team sport is something that you miss in the individual sport. You do miss that team spirit, that camaraderie, sharing it, but being a part of it. It's you on your own, which makes it a lot more, the pressure so much higher, but it also makes the glory way more, if you know what I mean.
Mm. So just on that then, Matt, so in terms of your kind of upbringing, you mentioned your dad's influence and also kind of small heath and that Irish influence as well from playing other sports. Was there any bit of advice that stood out in terms of your journey that made you have that sense of direction to push on to those elite levels? Is there anything you can recall reflecting back on that time that enabled you to kind of have that focus and drive to make it to that elite stage?
Well, when I used to go back to Ireland every summer and spend 8 weeks in the summer holidays in Tipperary, in a place called Ballingarry, South Tipperary. Now, my mum's side of the family are from Holy Cross, Ballycahal, which is only, I don't know, 10, 15 miles from there. But I didn't spend my summers there. It was actually friends of ours who we met, I think it was 1989, that summer holiday. My dad was working in the Channel Tunnel, and we went down for a few weeks to stay on like a caravan site. And next to us there was another family from Tipperary, and we met them on the first day, and we literally just hit it off and became like great family friends. Still are to today. They're like family. They're as good as family. And so we were back one summer, as we always did every year, to Roscommon, where my dad's from. And then we'd spend a few weeks there. We'd go down to Tipperary, where we'd spend a few nights, because most of my mum's family were all in Birmingham because they all emigrated over. And there was only a few relatives back there. But we went and stayed with the Lineses in Ballingarry for a couple of nights, and I ended up staying on for the whole summer then. And I played for that club. I played hurling for Ballingarry. So I did like my summers from 11 up to 16. I did it all in Tipperary, and I played for that club. And in fact, when I was 15, I'd literally, September had come around, I'd gone back to school, and the club actually flew me back to play a game. We were in the South Tipperary final against Mullinahone, which was they had a great, it was a South final. They had a great team as well, and they flew me back to play because there were better players. I definitely wasn't the best player in the team. I was only 15. This was the minor. I was playing under 18s. 15, 18, big jump, but I was a significant player, certainly enough for them to bring me back, thinking it was to make a difference. And we won by a point. And there was, hurling's an amateur sport, but there was I would have played with some outstanding talents, and not just talents, but outstanding winners. Real sort of winning mindset, out and out winners. As good a mindset as I've seen in any sport. including boxing. They really were out and out, and they would have been impacts to older lads that were doing well, that I looked up to, and they always had that kind of that razor. I don't know what's the word. That just had that will to win, um, whatever it takes mentality. You know what I mean? It was no problem sacrificing. So from a young age, I had no, I had no issue whatsoever suffering now to achieve later down the line. Delayed gratification. I've never, from a very young age, I never had a problem because I've seen it with other people. Um, I suppose they were good examples, good role models. I had no problem whatsoever in suffering, sacrificing, going without, getting my head down in order to achieve down the line. I always had that from a young age. It was ingrained in me to have that sort of foresight. Young lads as they're going through adolescence, going out. There's a lot of, you see a lot of lads fall by the wayside that are talented, that love the sport, but they don't have the focus or they don't have the discipline. But that was never a problem for me. Discipline was just, I had that drilled into me from young. I seen it from people who I looked up to, that they had it. So it was always something that I knew I was going to have.
Yeah. It's always interesting actually when you speak to people away from the Irish community and you talk about the GAA and the element of kind of there's a lack of extrinsic reward. You're representing your county rather than, purses and funding. It's a completely different concept in terms of that self-determination, that drive. But one thing I was going to ask and on that is how does that kind of help you in the element of coming up to a title shot then? So you have the opportunity and you've had this discipline, and you have this drive and you get the opportunity. What's kind of the thought process going into that process? And can you give some insight on how you stay disciplined to ensure that you compete to the best of your ability?
It's sort of like an evolution, isn't it? You evolve, you grow and you evolve. The discipline, like I said, that was something that was drilled into me, and something that I didn't push back against. I accepted, if you want this, you have to do this, and you have to go without that. Do you know what I mean? So that was like pretty clear to me. Do you know what I mean? I had no problem with that. And I seen people that I looked up to, and I knew people firsthand, and I'd looked up to them, and they'd kind of took me under their wing a little bit along the way. And I'd seen these people go without and, you know, sacrifice things and not be a part of things because they wanted to achieve. So I didn't want to follow the crowd. I wanted to do what they did. Do you know what I mean? So I was looking up to the right people in that regard. Um,
Yeah.
Certainly, my dad, like, he drilled it into me too. He always, from a young age, I'd be around my dad had given up drink, by the time I was born. And he did really, even though he brought me, we were still around all the drinking places, all the Irish pubs and that in Birmingham. And he took me everywhere with him, and he always used to drum it in, like, if you want to, because like I say, even before the boxing, I was took off to that level. I was talented. I was really good at the sports. You know what I mean? So I think I wanted to make it, in football, in whatever it was going to be. And he just, said, look, drinking, nah, that drinking, smoking, all that kind of carry on, that's a no. And I was like, yeah, sounds no problem. I had no interest in it. No, I did end up drinking it later, when I became an adult and that, but it was like few and far, never while I was training or anything like that, ever. Certainly, don't get me wrong, I'd blowouts in between fights and in training, and, took it to the excess and the extreme and all that type of thing. But I never had an issue or a problem putting it down, and I didn't even think about it. And once the date come, boom, I'm back in the gym. That was just weren't even a thing. Do you know what I mean? I was just like I wouldn't even have sugar in my tea. Do you know what I mean? Or whatever. But I was like, once I went into that mode, it was like you just become a different person completely. Um, and like I say, that was from a young age. I had that from young. Even like, I don't know. I'm trying to think what age. I remember getting up before school, going to go run in the morning. Do you know what I mean? Going out when it was pitch black, freezing cold outside, getting up the alarm, I go at 6 in the morning, and I'll be out the door at 6:30. I'll be back around, I don't know, 7:20. Do you know what I mean? Quick shower and that, get changed, go to school. Like, I'm talking like 16, like I didn't, no one was baby, but you know, by the time I was 16 and 17 and that, no problem getting up in the morning running. So I had that, I suppose, that discipline and that drive in me from a young age anyway, and I'd seen it. I'd been around on a personal level, not necessarily professional footballers or but a couple of boxers that were boxing professionally, not to any great level, but they were, you know, they were still, they still had that level. They were still disciplined and they still trained hard. And but certainly in the GAA circles, I was around people that were playing at that highest level. They were playing inter-county hurling for Tipperary, you know, at senior level, and you know, a few friends. So that, and I seen the commitment. So for me, if you wanted to make it, you wanted to be successful in sport, I knew it was a disciplined lifestyle. So that was never a problem for me.
Mm. In terms of coping then, in terms of that elite environment then, Matt, so obviously that fight with Jamie Moore wasn't successful for you. How do you kind of come back from that? Because you mentioned earlier in the podcast in terms of in comparison to other sports, you know, there's always a next game, but for yourself, you know, there might be 2 fights a year or 1 fight a year or however it worked for you during that time. Is there anything that you did in terms of your mentality to kind of regroup and recap on such a low moment for you from that disciplined lifestyle that you mentioned, and then obviously not seeing the fruits of your labor in terms of belts, et cetera, during that time?
Yeah, so that, I mean, that was a tough period. So after the Moore fight, you know, I woke up in hospital. Like, you know, I mean, I believe I was conscious getting into the ambulance. I was, you know, knocked out, stretchered, all that in the ambulance. Came around, was kept in overnight, done brain scans, all that. Kept in on a drip to rehydrate me. Got out next day. You know, came back to Birmingham, and we walked into a pub in Acos Green called the Maggie's, which is where we would have gone at the time, and a lot of people would have known. And when I walked in, it was, I think it was birthday. I think there was a 40th on, and but it was or a 30th or something. But it was you know, I got like a big cheer when I came in, because even though I lost that fight against Jamie, it was a humdinger. You know what I mean? It was an epic battle. Um, so even though I lost the fight, I think in lots of ways, my reputation probably grew with that fight. That said, when that all wears off and the weeks and months go by, it's still a loss. And I lost for a British title when I turned pro at 19 and 5 years into my career now. I thought I'd have been knocking on the door for a world title by now. Now I'm 24 years old with 2 losses under my belt at British level. So, you know, and then there was, you know, it was such a brutal fight. Neither of us were going to box anytime soon because we needed to recover, heal, rest, etc. But come New Year, I wanted to get cracking, and I was meant to box in January, and I come down with a chest infection 2 weeks before, pulled out of the fight. Then I was meant to box in March, bruised my ribs sparring, and it was going to box in May, and television dates clashed or something. The television pulled the plug on the date, and the show fell apart. So by the time I fought in the July, you know, I'd been out of the ring after that loss for nearly, what was it, 10 months. You know, and it was a difficult 10-month period, mentally, emotionally, to, you know, to pick yourself up off a loss, and especially a loss like that, a traumatic loss where you've been in hospital, and you know, reading reports and opinions afterwards. Yeah, people saying, "Wow, what a fight!" All that, but then also people saying he'll probably never box again after that, and if he does box again, he'll never be the same after a fight like that. Um, I didn't believe that, but also I don't know, do I? Because I haven't been here before, so you know, I don't think it's going to bother me because I'm a type of guy. You go into boxing, of course you can get knocked out. You know, I was never deluded into thinking there's 2 guys in there. It's a 50, you know what I mean? Having a 50-50 fight was a 50% chance you can get knocked out. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, going in, you don't think you're 100% convinced you're going to win. But in reality, of course, it's a 50% chance. It's the 2-horse race. But, you know, it was tough. It was a tough period, and especially with the fights falling through and things like that. And just the frustration of it, and the loneliness of it, and then thinking, "Oh, what? Gee, where I'm 24 years of age. Where am I going? Am I as good as I thought I was,
Mm.
or am I not as good as I thought I was? You know, maybe potentially I was, but maybe I've made a few bad decisions and mistakes along the way, and I haven't developed to where I should be now. And maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe I've missed the boat. These things do circulate around your head when you're sitting on your own, or because I was trained up in Manchester around this time. So when I finished at the gym, I was just going back to sit in a house on my own, in a flat on my own, or I might kill the time walking around the city centre, getting a coffee, but lonely, very lonely, very much in my own head. And if I've left the gym and I've had a bad spa, then the self-doubt creeps in and all the, confidence on the floor, all of a sudden the negativity, negative thoughts bouncing. So there was definitely some lonely, not dark as in like dark, but in terms of like, it didn't feel good. Do you know what I mean? That it definitely didn't feel good. Confidence would have been low certain times, but that's part of the journey. Do you know what I mean? Success, people who are successful, people who make it, people who achieve, they've all been through that at some point. Even the highest flyers in the world that you see, they've had their moments. Do you know what I mean? They've lost a lot to get to where they've got to. They've failed many times. They've had bad days, they've had wins, they've had losses, So it's like, how much do you want it? Do you know what I mean? How much do you want it? Because it isn't gonna be all rosy. If you wanna if you want to achieve in anything, you better be you better buckle up, 'cause it's gonna be a rocky journey. It ain't all gonna be suns and, flowers. It's tough, not just obviously physically it's tough boxing, but mentally, emotionally, disappointments, frustration, it like I said, a loss is difficult to come back from, but like a fight, an injury, you're training hard, everything's going well, and you get an injury. And now you gotta put that back. That's frustrating. I've been back to America, I've spent thousands of pounds, flights, hotels, for, everything, hiring a car, all the rest of it. Bang, 6 weeks in, an injury. Then you gotta come back. That doesn't get reimbursed.
Mm.
I'm not on a monthly salary from Man United. Do you know what I mean? I get paid when I fight. When I fight, I don't earn. I've already invested that money. I've invested that. I'm funding that myself, you know? So, it's it financially, it's tough. Mentally, the disappointment of it, frustration, and not what now? What's going to happen now? That fight
Mm.
hasn't happened. Is he going to move on and fight someone else? Am I not going to get that shot again? There's, you know, so much. I think a lot of managing. When I look back, certainly the guy who managed me, Brian Peters, who manages Casey Taylor now, and lots of other good fighters. I'd say there would have been times where there was, yeah, they've got expertise, and it's advice at making the right decisions and negotiating deals for you. But I'd say also at times it's almost like counseling you. Do you know what I mean? Keeping you believing in yourself, keeping you believing in the journey, that it is gonna get there, talking you through the tough days. Do you know what I mean?
Well, one phrase that comes to mind when you spoke then was, I don't know if you ever heard it, is the idle mind is the devil's playground. So when you kind of set on your own and you kind of overthink things, and you mentioned the element of being in Manchester and trying to occupy yourself, you kind of overthink, and you mentioned those setbacks that can kind of bring some form of doubt and confidence within that. One thing I wanted to add to that, Matt, was obviously boxing being very masculine in its way and kind of very much, toughen up, get on with it, you gotta go with it. Was there anyone in terms of that mental support through that process that helped you within that moment for you? Or is it kind of was it just kind of not was it kind of forbidden? I'm just interested on that in terms of how that might be different to maybe how we see kind of new modern ways of supporting athletes. Was there anything around that psychological element that supported you in terms of your journey?
Well, my dad wouldn't have been into that kind of carry on at all. It'd have been like, "Man up." Do you know what I mean? Man the fuck up, and, be feeling sorry for yourself now, get up there and get at it again. Do you know what I mean? That was very much like that was the upbringing in that way. Certainly, there was no sitting there talking it out, feeling sorry for yourself. You know what I mean? It was literally, no, you know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that's right either. I think there's definitely sometimes it is the thing, yeah, and it's not always. Sometimes you need it's not as easy as that, but, and sometimes that is the right advice as well. You know, it is tough, it is hard, it is lonely, but what did you expect? This is what you signed up for.
Yeah.
How much do you want it? You're gonna sit there and cry and feel sorry for yourself. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. You think all these people who are at the top now haven't gone through what you're going through right now? We're gonna sit there, roll over and feel sorry for yourself and cry and whinge, and what are you gonna do? Quit? Or you gonna man the fuck up, face what you have to face? Do you know what I mean? And today's a bad day. Well, tomorrow's another day
Yeah.
as well. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you're not gonna have a good day every day, and sometimes having that's the sort of
Yeah.
the nicer talk where someone, you can hit you hard with it and give the hard facts, but then they can also say, look, you didn't get here. It's just reminding you sometimes of the journey you've been on that to get to here. You know, when you're having a bad day, you're having a bad day. You can catastrophize. The negativity kicks in, and you can just go on. One negative thought follows another. And before you know it, you thought yourself into a black hole. Sometimes you just got to call on your past experiences to go. And sometimes someone has to prompt you and go, well, do you remember that fight? Or do you remember that game? You know, you build up to that. Well, shit, do you know what I mean? You did play well. This never happened. You got injured, but on the night you got it together, and actually it was one of your better games, or one of your better fights, or whatever. And you remember that. Sometimes you have to be reminded
Yeah.
of that, and you're like, and that like sort of switching perspective and thinking, no, that's right, yeah. You know what I mean? Everything happens for a reason. Just sometimes some of the best lessons, or most of the best lessons, came from defeat or bad days. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes the best days came right off the back of a bad one, because probably it remotivated you, it refocused you. You probably looked, but you went down and looked at your preparation with a fine tooth comb again, because it'd be nice if we never got complacent. It'd be nice if we were 100% up for it for every single match, every single fight, but we wouldn't be human if we did do that. We try our best, and your coaches try and get you up for it and everything, all the rest of it, but they're human too. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, you know,
How did you find fighting in America? Obviously, St. Patrick's Day and the other major events that you took part in. How did you find that process in terms of kind of going overseas and fighting abroad?
I loved it because, boxing and training in America and boxing in America was something I always wanted to do. Um, when I was not, I'd never been to America, or none of our family had, but when I was 19, I turned professional with Frank Warren, and they flew, before my pro debut, he flew me out to Los Angeles, um, to Freddie Roach's gym, the wild card. This was before the wild card was the wild card, before Manny Pacquiao made it super famous, and Freddie had a run with Khan. But, it was still a good gym at the time, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't what it became. And it was, but I went out there, and I loved it. I loved America. I loved the gym, and I always wanted. And I went back there the following year. Myself paid for myself to go back out there. And the following 2 years, so I liked that American experience. I liked the gyms. So boxing there was something I always wanted to do. So when I had the opportunity to do it, I did. And first time I fought was in 2005. I boxed there. I had 2 fights there back to back in Atlantic City and Philadelphia, and had a great support. The guy who was sorting the fights out for me was an Irish American guy called Tom Moran. He used to manage Tim Witherspoon, Cassie Muma, and he drummed up a lot of support within the Irish American community. They definitely turned out for me. And then what was it, 6 years later, whatever it was, I fought Sergio Martinez at Madison Square Garden. So um, on St. Patrick's Day, that was definitely one of the highlights of my career. I mean, I didn't win the fight, but it was a good fight. It was a very, very competitive fight right up to the very end. It was on HBO. I was at a billboard in Times Square for about 6 weeks, so that was pretty cool. Um, yeah, I can't even remember what the original question was.
Yeah, yeah. Just in terms of obviously America itself, just on that element of kind of building your fan base, and you mentioned your promoter and kind of the Irish Americans coming out to watch. Did you feel a sense of an added layer of pressure performing on that day, just for the fact that there was such a kind of massive atmosphere around that, and obviously you're representing Ireland in the sense of fighting for them?
Well, I went out to America 11 weeks before that fight. Started training. Like, I wasn't in good shape. I was like, Christmas had been New Year. I was out of shape, but 11 weeks, plenty of time. And, you start getting fitter, you start losing the weight, and you start sparring, and the first couple of weeks of sparring wasn't great, timing was off, my distance was out, I was heavy, I was sluggish, but I was getting it week on week, I was getting better, and, I was about 3 weeks out from the fight, and, Brian Peters, who managed me, come out with a guy who used to sponsor me called Martin Donnelly, and, 3 of the Tipperary senior hurlers that I was friends with when I was younger and I played with, Aaron Kelly, John Bryan, and Lark Corbett. And it was a bit of like a promo thing, really, for the papers back in Ireland, etc. And they came out and we sparred that day, I think, on the Tuesday. And I remember I sparred well that day. It was the best I'd sparred up till now. I was just coming good. Do you know what I mean? I had 3 weeks left to the fight. So I probably had 6 more sparring sessions and probably another 8 or 9 pad sessions. Do you know what I mean? These are the sessions now where you get that peak. Anyway, after that night, I didn't feel it in the spar. I didn't even feel it after because your adrenaline's going, you're warm and everything. But that night, I remember thinking my rib felt a bit sore. And the next day, when I got up, I couldn't get out of bed. So I wasn't going to spar that day anyway. But the following day, I would have sparred. But when I went in, we didn't spar. My ribs were really hurt me. So when I got an X-ray on them, and they said to me, they're not broke, but they're bruised. So it was like, what we're going to do? Do you know what I mean? So we didn't spar. Was all I can't spar. So on the Saturday, which would have been 2 weeks out from the fight, we did 12 rounds on this. And Buddy McGirt, who was training me, wore this body pad thing, and I was really sinking these body shots in, really, really banging them in. And when I'd finished the 12 rounds, and I took my gloves off, like my knuckles had been like, they weren't just skinned; they were dug in. They were like contusions, and I'd really messed up my knuckles, and it was like, fuck. But it was like, well, what are you going to do? Now, if I'd have been Sergio Martinez, if I'd have been the A side, if I'd have been the world champion, I'd have definitely just pulled out of the fight because the knuckles are fucked and they won't any heal in a couple of weeks. And do you know what I mean? And the rib and everything else. But I wasn't the champion. I was getting the world title shot, and there was no.
Yeah.
If I didn't fight, it was on St Patrick's Day with Madison Square Garden. If I hadn't fought him then, he was going to move on. He was going to move on to fight Chavez Jr. or whoever. He wasn't going to sit around and wait for me. Do you know what I mean? He was the star. I was the B side. Do you know what I mean? So you've got a decision then. Do you pull out and hope that it comes back around, or do you think, well, I am fit. I've just done 12 hard rounds there. I've been sparring for the last few weeks, so it's not like I haven't sparred. I have sparred. The day I did the ribs, I sparred 9 rounds. I'm in good shape. You know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? It's a shame, obviously, but what am I going to do when it comes to decision time? What are you going to do? You're going to pull out and hope that maybe this opportunity comes back around. Plus, I was 30 at this point. I've been pro 10, 11 years. Again, spent a fortune in terms of sparring partners, hotels, flights, food, everything to get to in terms of the training camp, etc. It was a world title shot, like I say, St Patrick's Day, Madison Square Garden, and I was getting a lot of money for the fight as well. So these are all factors that you got to weigh up. And I was fit. I was fit. Do you know what I mean? I've been training for the last I don't know, 8 weeks. I was in good shape. Do you know what I mean? My weight was good. I was fit. So it was like, but it was a shame that I didn't that sort of probably last 10%. Those last 5, 6 sparring sessions, those last 8, 9 pad sessions. That's going to add an extra 10% to your performance at least, probably. And when I think of how close and competitive the fight was, after 10 rounds, I was 3 rounds up on one of the cards and only a round down on the other 2. It was a close fight. Of course, he put me down then twice at the end of the 11th, and Buddy McGirt, my coach, stopped the fight, didn't let me out for the last. But those things, they're tough moments because you've got to make a decision. And like I say, you have to weigh it up. There's a lot of things to factor in. And even the Golovkin fight, similar thing happened with the knuckles. And it was, again, I was fine by the time of the fight, but there was a 2-week period there where I couldn't punch. I was just shadow boxing and running, so physically fit. And we did spar after that and whatever, but I wasn't where I should have been in terms of preparation wise, and when you physically, but also more important mentally, because when I agreed to the fight with Golovkin, I believed I could beat him. I knew it was tough and hard. I knew I was an underdog, big underdog, but underdogs win. Do you know what I mean? Underdogs, favourites get beaten, great fighters get beaten. You know, it happens all the time. And I remember thinking to myself, look, he probably 9 times out of 10, he probably beats me. I've just got to make that night that one time. Do you know what I mean? And hopefully he underestimates me. Hopefully, but I did, but I did believe I could win the fight. But I think by the time the fight come around, with all the when the injuries happened and all the things I had to miss out in training, my belief wasn't where it should have been. I was walking to the ring hoping I could win. I was walking to the ring thinking I could win, but I wouldn't say I believed to my core that I was going to win, because I knew he was a really good fighter and I knew I wasn't tip top. But again, yeah, sorry, but again, it was a world title shot. I'm 31 at this point. Um, I'm getting a career best payday, which is a big factor at this point in my career. There was injuries early on in my career and I just pulled out of the fight. There was no
So, you learnt that.
it wasn't even a consideration to train through it or around it, because I was young. Do you know what I mean? I was 20 or 21. There was years ahead of me. I was only very much on the up, so I was like, "No, mate, I'm injured. I'm not gonna I'm not even gonna train on the injury to make it worse. I've got my whole career ahead of me." But at 31, you know what I mean? And having been through the mill with fights being pulled out, and I'd changed trainers, I'd changed promoters, I'd had a real mixed bag of a career type thing. It was like these world title shots, these paydays as well, these opportunities aren't gonna just keep coming round. So those were big factors in going ahead with a fight, which they were less than ideal circumstances, obviously.
Just on, just the fight that you had with Felix Sturm in terms of, I think you gave quite an emotional interview after it in terms of, like, maybe the micro politics of kind of judges and scorecards, et cetera. What are your thoughts on that as a whole from the boxing industry? So you mentioned the element of being the underdog and training and discipline and all these different factors that happen. And I think in the interview, it's very much emphasised around kind of scorecards and how that played out for you. What were your thoughts on that as a whole?
Oh, as a commentator, I've scored a lot of fights. My unofficial scorecard for Sky, let's say, keeping an unofficial scorecard. They do a viewer's scorecard now. They just go with the kind of
Yeah.
whatever the average is of people voting online. But for a long time, me as the lead co-commentator, I would keep an unofficial scorecard. So at the end of every round, it's a 10-point more system, 10 points for the winner, 9 points for the loser. If there's a knockdown, it could be 10-8 rounds, this type of thing. Points off, whatever. And at the end of the fight, you just add up the scorecard and it is what it is. Do you know what I mean? Now, having been having done that role as, like I say, as a co-commentator, keeping an unofficial card in an era of social media, you can imagine some of the shit I've had after fights, And the reality is so many fights are close. So many fights against two top guys are close. A lot of the rounds are close. You know what I mean? It's hard to pick a winner sometimes, but you can't keep scoring every round 10-10. Listen, sometimes you just can't separate them and you'll go 10-10, but there is criteria scoring a fight that you're meant to go to if you can't separate them. Like, well, was there, effective aggression, blah, blah, all these different things, because they want you to try and find the winner of the round. Now, I remember, just for example, coming back from AJ Usyk, the rematch, which Usyk won on a split decision. And I don't know, say 90 people comment, they had 90 notifications, comments. It was like 30 people were saying something along the lines of, Macklin's a wanker. He's just bitter and sore that AJ's left Sky, blah, blah, blah. But then you got another 30 people saying, Macklin's a wanker. He's up Eddie Hearn's arse, Matchroom Sky bias. So these people haven't even, they don't follow it enough to realise that AJ actually isn't even with Sky anymore. You've got the ones that think I'm bitter because he's left Sky. Then you got the ones thinking I'm biased to them because it's a Sky Matchroom bias. So we, you, th- who, those people are watching the same fight, hearing the same commentary, but they're hearing a completely different thing. And then you got 30 people saying, Macklin calls it spot on or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So what I mean is people hear what they hear. Now the Sturm fight, what I will say is,
Of course.
American TV, Lennox Lewis and Dan Raphael that were scoring that fight for Epics, American TV, had me winning 117, 111, 9 rounds to 3. Axel Schultz, who was commentating for German TV, had me winning 8 rounds to 4, 116, 112. 88% of German viewers watching it on German television, voting online, 88% had me winning. It was a good fight. It was a hard fight. It was a very competitive fight. Felix Sturm absolutely played his part in it. But I think the overwhelming majority of people watching that fight thought I won the fight. I thought I won the fight. And I know the Felix Sturms thought I won the fight. He never said a word in the press conference. He never said a word. And he said actually years later, they interviewed him on his, it must have been on the anniversary of when he fought Oscar De La Hoya, when he should have got the decision. But De La Hoya was already signed to box Bernard Hopkins. And they gave it De La Hoya. Sturm was unlucky, he should have got it. And they were asking him about it. And he said, he talked about it. And then he said, sometimes you get the rub of the green. There were a couple of fights that in my career where maybe I was on the right side of a close one. And then he singled out me. He said, in particular, the Macklin one. Years later, he said it, but it's one of them. I don't have the world title belt on my mantelpiece. I didn't get it. So it's came close with Martinez, came uber close. Should have had it with Sturm, but that's the way it goes. But do I think it was corrupt? I don't think so. I don't know. I think people get swayed, with the crowd. People get swayed. People see how they see it. Like I say, he's I don't know. The judge that had him winning, he's not the only person that had him winning. Do you know what I mean? But they're in they're in a massive minority. Do you know what I mean? Like I said, Sturm played his part. It was a good fight. Do you know what I mean? And that's one thing that probably pisses me off about it. Not just that I was the wrong end of the decision. I mean, I'm glad that people talk about the decision when it comes up, but it's a shame in one sense because nobody talks about what a great fight that was. And it was a great fight, of which he absolutely played his part. Like it was a ding dong, do you know, and it was an unbelievable fight. But no one really says that. Everyone just talks about the decision, which is a shame.
In terms of your overall career then, so if I get you to reflect on Martinez, Sturm and Golovkin, is there anything that you've learned about yourself during that process in terms of being in America and those big major events and the practice and discipline and maybe just reflecting on that time now, is there anything that you've learned as like maybe a life lesson for yourself, just thinking about those moments in terms of your journey, Matt?
A million life lessons, do you know what I mean? But I think certainly with the Martinez fight, the way that all happened with the injury, like I remember, you know, some people have entourages, don't know what I remember turning up at Madison Square Garden and got picked up in a car. Me and my brother, and have a bag, and that was it. My manager and my trainer, they were already in there. And like I said, I hadn't punched for 2 weeks because my knuckles were still bad. The rib, it was 3 weeks, but I had been training. I had been out there for 10, 11 weeks. Do you know what I mean? Like I was fit. And I remember just thinking to myself, and I remember, like you say, calling back on experiences even from the amateur days, whether we're, boxing abroad. I had an injury, but I wanted to go to the tournament and I went, and actually I performed really well. You know what I mean? I was calling back on that to get confidence because, it's not ideal. You're going into a world title fight. I'm an underdog. It's Sergio Martinez, pound for pound, just behind Mayweather and Pacquiao at the time. Awkward style, all that sort of stuff. And I'm trying to it hasn't gone how I would have liked the last few weeks. And I'm just trying to keep my spirits up, trying to get my confidence. I'm sourcing confidence from past experiences. And I remember just thinking to myself, in the process of calling back on past, there were times when preparations hadn't gone great for me, but I performed really well on the night, and then I remember, because there's some fighters, they're great in the gym, but when it comes down to it on the night, they underperform. They can't when it matters. The pressure gets to them or whatever. And I've always been the opposite to that. I've had times when I wasn't great in the gym. Do you know what I mean? Probably look. Well, definitely. I definitely had bad days in the gym, but when it was on the night when it mattered, I could always perform. Um, and even like I say, even though I lost the fight, I did perform against Martinez. So but in life lessons, look, it's a lonely road, boxing. It is a lonely, lonely, lonely road, in comparison to other sports. It's a tough game. It's a tough business. I've renewed my manager's license. When I retired, I was managing a few fighters. I went out to America with Michael Conlon, done his deal with Bob Arum, Top Rank. In his first year, I worked very closely with Top Rank, managing Nick, but also promoting him on the ground level in New York within the Irish community from the contacts and people I knew from when I lived out there, from when I was fighting there. And, and then I stepped away from the management. The punditry got busier with Sky. I got sick of the traveling. I hadn't really processed my own career. I wanted to sort of get settled. I was sick of living out of bag, sick of flying around the world. It looks glamorous and it looks the business on social media, but actually it's quite lonely. And I'd had enough of it and I wanted to settle down. I wanted to build a relationship with someone. I'd had lots of flings and relations, but I hadn't really I'd never really given any of them relationships a chance because I was just here, there and everywhere. So I knew I had to get a bit more stable in order for that to happen. And I did, and I've got a couple of kids now, and I've renewed. But so now I feel like this year's been the right time to renew my manager's license. So all of the experience that I've picked up through my own career, between negotiating and dealing with promoters and television, broadcasters, networks, sponsors, all that stuff, go through the injuries, I can advise and pass on wisdom to boxers that lots of other guys can't. 'Cause they can read about it in a book, but they don't know what it's felt like. I know what it was like to be sat in Los Angeles for 10 weeks, going back to a hotel room when you're costing you a fortune to be out there. You're on your own and you've had a shit day in the gym. You've had your head boxed off in a sparring session. You're sitting there feeling sorry for yourself, thinking, so I can empathise with all that.
Matt, I just want to finish there and say, obviously, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. Obviously, growing up in a similar community, obviously, I grew up in the Birmingham Irish community. I think it's really interesting your journey and how your stories become apparent. And obviously, you mentioned the element of your future and punditry and management. Hopefully, it's early days for you, and hopefully, you can share your story to inspire others as well. So, I just want to wish you all the best. I won't be on Twitter talking about your scorecards, so don't worry about that. But hopefully, we can keep in touch and. Yeah, good luck in the future, mate. And hopefully, all those things that you've just mentioned today will inspire people in the future of boxing. So, good luck and all the best.
Cheers, thanks.